the glittering shadows of a lavish gala, where secrets hid behind crystal chandeliers and forced smiles, I stood forgotten behind a cold marble pillar, until the man who haunted my dreams for decades locked eyes with me across the room. His gaze pierced the crowd like a predator sensing prey, and in that frozen heartbeat, I knew my carefully buried past was about to drag me into a storm that could shatter my fragile life forever. The evening that shattered everything began with a simple announcement, but nothing about my life with Thomas Carter was ever truly simple. As I stood in our pristine laundry room, the scent of fresh linen filling the air, my hands methodically folding his crisp shirts, he strode in without a glance. His voice cut through the quiet hum of the dryer like a blade. "We're going to the charity gala tonight." My fingers froze on the fabric, the blouse crumpling slightly in my grip. For 22 years, I'd been the invisible wife, the one who managed the home, penned gracious notes after events I never attended, and faded into the background of holiday photos. Public appearances? Those were his domain, where he shone under the spotlight of Indiana's elite, his name evoking a mix of respect and subtle fear. "You need to come," he added, eyes glued to his phone screen, scrolling through messages that always seemed more important than me. "The new owner will be there. Everything has to look proper." Proper. That word hung in the air, heavy with unspoken judgment. I swallowed the knot in my throat, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Are you sure? I mean, do I even have something suitable?" Finally, he looked up, his gaze sweeping over me like an appraiser valuing a flawed antique. Disappointment flickered in his eyes, a look I'd grown accustomed to, one that made my stomach twist with shame. "Find something plain, nothing that draws attention. And Evelyn, try not to embarrass me." The words stung, familiar barbs woven into the fabric of our marriage. Don't speak out of turn. Don't question. Don't remind anyone of your humble roots. Exist quietly, usefully, invisibly. That's what good wives did in Thomas's world. I rummaged through a consignment shop on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where forgotten dresses waited for second chances. The navy blue one I chose was modest, hugging my figure without shouting for notice. Standing before the mirror in our dimly lit bedroom that evening, I stared at my reflection, a woman in her 40s, lines etching stories of quiet endurance around her eyes. Who was she anymore? The question lingered as I applied a touch of makeup, my hands trembling slightly. Was this the same girl who'd once dreamed of teaching, of a life filled with purpose? Or had she been erased, layer by layer, until only this shell remained? The gala venue was a vision of opulence Thomas adored. Sparkling chandeliers casting diamond-like reflections on white tablecloths, the air thick with rehearsed laughter and the clink of crystal glasses. Women glided by in shimmering gowns that screamed wealth and armor, while men exchanged handshakes laced with deals and dominance. As soon as we entered, Thomas leaned in close, his breath hot against my ear. "Stay toward the back. I'll fetch you when it's time." But time stretched endlessly. He guided me to a spot near a grand marble column by the bar, positioning me like a prop he didn't want spotlighted. Then he was gone, straightening his jacket as if brushing away any trace of me, diving into the crowd with a charisma he never showed at home. I clutched a glass of water, the cool condensation seeping into my skin, watching from my shadowed perch as Thomas transformed. Across the room, he laughed louder, gestured sharper, his face alive with ambition. He was courting favor, impressing those who held the keys to his precarious empire. My heart ached with a familiar loneliness, but I pushed it down, reminding myself this was my role, to support without intruding. Then the atmosphere shifted. A hush rippled through the ballroom, conversations tapering off like a wave receding from shore. Heads turned, postures straightened, glasses hovered mid-sip. Even the orchestra's melody seemed to soften, deferring to the presence that had just entered. I lifted my gaze, curiosity overriding my instinct to remain unseen. A tall figure stepped into the space, exuding an effortless authority that didn't beg for attention, it commanded it. He moved with unhurried grace, his dark suit tailored to perfection, his expression calm yet intense. Whispers followed him. Lucas Hale. The name sent a jolt through me, electric and terrifying. Lucas. My Lucas? No, it couldn't be. I'd buried that chapter decades ago, locked it away with regrets and what-ifs. But as his eyes scanned the room, methodical, searching, they locked onto mine. Hidden as I was in the dim light behind the pillar, I felt exposed, stripped bare. His face paled, jaw clenching as recognition dawned. The powerful mogul vanished in an instant, replaced by a man haunted by ghosts. My breath caught, pulse thundering in my ears. This wasn't possible. Thomas noticed too, his features sharpening with opportunistic glee. He adjusted his cufflinks, smoothed his hair, and pushed forward, arm outstretched for a handshake that carried all his hidden desperations, debts, ambitions, fragile status. Mr. Hale, it's an honor, Thomas began, his voice booming with false confidence. Lucas accepted the grip briefly, dismissively, his focus already drifting. Those piercing eyes never left me. He released Thomas mid-sentence, stepping past him as if he were an inconsequential obstacle. Thomas faltered, words trailing into silence, confusion morphing into irritation as he followed Lucas's path, straight to me. The crowd parted like a sea before him, murmurs building into a low buzz. I should have fled, slipped into the shadows deeper, but my legs refused to move. My hands shook, pressing the glass tighter until I feared it might shatter. He stopped, mere inches away, close enough for me to catch the faint scent of his cologne, woodsy, familiar, stirring memories I'd fought to forget. Fine lines framed his eyes, signs of years past, but the intensity in them was unchanged. His breath hitched, voice low and raw. Evelyn. My name on his lips was a caress and a wound, laden with unspoken history. Lucas, I whispered, the sound barely escaping, my throat tight with emotion. Behind us, the room fell utterly still, the weight of curious eyes pressing in. He reached for my hands, his touch warm and sure, igniting a spark I'd thought extinguished. No hesitation, just pure, aching familiarity that weakened my knees. I've been looking for you for a very long time, he murmured, his voice steady but his eyes glistening with restrained tears. The confession hung between us, fragile and profound. Thomas arrived then, face flushed, smile brittle. Lucas Hale, he interjected with a forced chuckle. I think there's been a mix-up. This is my wife, Evelyn. Lucas didn't glance his way, his focus unwavering. I never stopped loving you, he said to me, words soft yet resonant, slicing through the tension like a knife. A gasp echoed nearby, followed by the sharp crash of a dropped glass. Thomas's hand clamped onto my arm, grip vice-like, pain shooting up my limb. But I didn't flinch outwardly. Inside, turmoil raged. I was transfixed by Lucas, the man who'd once been my everything, now cracking open the facade of my existence. "We should talk privately," Lucas suggested, tone even but firm. Thomas scoffed. "Nothing to discuss here." Finally, Lucas turned, his gaze cold and final, a look that made Thomas shrink slightly. Then, back to me, he slipped a business card into my palm, fingers lingering. "Call me. We need to finish what was interrupted." As Thomas yanked me away, his nails digging in, I curled my fingers around the card. For the first time in years, someone had truly seen me and refused to let me vanish. The drive home from the gala was a study in suffocating silence. Thomas's knuckles gleamed white against the steering wheel, the city lights streaking past in cold, indifferent blurs. Every few seconds, his jaw flexed, teeth grinding audibly in the confined space of the car. I sat rigid in the passenger seat, the business card burning a hole in my palm where I'd hidden it inside my clutch. My arm still throbbed from his grip earlier, 5 crescent-shaped marks I knew would darken by morning. But the physical pain felt distant compared to the storm churning inside me. I kept replaying Lucas's words. "I never stopped loving you." They echoed louder than the engine, louder than the blood rushing in my ears. How many nights had I lain awake beside Thomas, convincing myself that what Lucas and I had shared was just youthful fantasy? How many times had I told myself the ache in my chest was nostalgia, not grief? Now the lie felt paper thin, ready to tear. We pulled into the driveway. Thomas killed the engine but didn't move. The house loomed dark ahead, its perfect symmetry mocking me. Finally, he spoke, voice low and dangerously calm. "So, that's him." He didn't look at me. "The ghost from your past." I said nothing. There was no safe answer. He laughed then, a short, bitter bark that made the hairs on my arms stand up. "You looked like you'd seen a resurrection." He unbuckled his seatbelt slowly, deliberately. "As if you'd been waiting for him all these years." "I didn't know he would be there," I whispered. Thomas turned then, eyes glittering in the dashboard glow. "Oh, I believe you. That's what makes it almost poetic." He reached over and flicked on the interior light, forcing me to meet his gaze. "I've known about Lucas Hale for a long time, Evelyn." The world tilted. My mouth went dry. What do you mean?" "I mean, I've known he was hunting for you." He leans back, studying me like a specimen under glass. "Private investigators, discreet inquiries, old friends suddenly asking questions they hadn't in decades. He wasn't subtle. Persistent, though, I'll give him that." My heart slammed against my ribs. "You knew he was looking for me?" "Of course I knew." Thomas's smile was thin, satisfied. "A man like him doesn't move through the world without ripples. I made sure those ripples never reached you." The confession landed like ice water down my spine. "You stopped him," I breathed. "All these years, you made sure he couldn't find me." "I protected our marriage," he corrected smoothly. "I protected what we built together." "What we built?" My voice cracked. "You built a prison, Thomas, and you locked me inside." His expression hardened, the mask of composure slipping just enough to reveal the anger beneath. "Don't be dramatic. You came to me broken, pregnant by another man, scholarship hanging by a thread, future in tatters. I gave you stability, a name, a home. Most women would be grateful." "Grateful," I repeated, the word tasting like ash. "You stole my past. You let him believe I didn't want him." "Yes," he said simply, without remorse. "Because if he'd found you, you would have left, and we both know it." The truth of it sliced deeper than any blade. I pictured Lucas, young, hopeful Lucas, searching for answers that never came. Endless, unanswered calls, letters returned, friends shrugging helplessly. Years of wondering why the woman he loved had vanished without explanation. And all the while, Thomas had been pulling strings from the shadows, paying people to lie, to mislead, to erase me from Lucas's reach. Something inside me fractured then, not with a scream, but with a quiet, irreversible snap. I looked at the man I'd shared a bed with for 22 years and saw him clearly for the first time. Not a protector, not a provider, but a collector. He hadn't loved me. He'd possessed me, owned the narrative of my life the way he owned the house, the accounts, the carefully curated image. "You didn't just control me," I said slowly, each word gaining strength. "You tortured him, and you enjoyed it." Thomas shrugged, unperturbed. "Collateral damage." I stared at him, waiting for guilt, regret, anything human. There was nothing, just cold calculation. He reached for the door handle. "This conversation is over. Go inside, sleep it off. Tomorrow we'll pretend tonight never happened." But I didn't move. My hand closed tighter around the hidden card. For the first time in decades, the fear that had kept me small felt smaller than the rage rising in its place. That night, sleep refused to come. Thomas retreated to his study after his confession, the door closing with a soft, final click that sounded like a warning. I sat alone at the kitchen island in the dark, the house pressing in around me like a living thing. Marble countertops gleamed coldly under the faint moonlight filtering through the blinds. Every tick of the clock felt amplified, counting down to something inevitable. I thought of the girl I'd been at 21, bright-eyed, determined, believing love could outrun threats. Lucas had proposed by the lake behind campus, autumn leaves drifting on the water like scattered promises. His hands had trembled as he slid his grandmother's ring onto my finger. I'd said yes without a second thought. Then, his family had summoned me to their downtown office. They knew everything. My scholarships, my parents' modest life, my dreams of teaching. One call, they said, and it would all disappear. Lucas's career prospects, too. They offered money to walk away quietly. I refused at first, clinging to hope. Then I discovered I was pregnant. I planned to tell him. We would face it together. But fear is faster than hope. 3 weeks later, I returned the ring, told him we were too different, watched his face collapse while I forced myself not to cry. I disappeared from his life the way a stone sinks into deep water, silent, complete. The miscarriage came alone in a sterile clinic bathroom. I grieved the baby, the future, the man I'd loved. Lucas searched for me. I knew he did. I felt it in the unanswered messages, the sudden appearances at places I'd once frequented. But I stayed gone, believing it protected us both. 6 months later, Thomas proposed. Steady, practical, safe. I said yes because safety felt like salvation after so much loss. I told myself love could come later, but love doesn't grow where silence is required. Now, clutching Lucas's card like a lifeline, I understood the depth of the betrayal. Thomas hadn't just kept me from Lucas, he'd weaponized my fear, turned my sacrifice into his victory. Every "don't embarrass me," every controlled allowance, every subtle withdrawal of affection, it had all been part of the same design, to keep me small, dependent, invisible. By dawn, my hands no longer shook. Thomas left early, already on his phone, already managing the fallout from the gala. The moment his car vanished down the street, I picked up my own phone. My thumb hovered over the number on the card for what felt like an eternity. Calling meant stepping off a cliff. No net, no guarantees. I pressed dial anyway. He answered on the second ring, voice soft, expectant. Evelyn. The sound of my name in his mouth undid me. Tears I'd held back for decades burned behind my eyes. Lucas, I managed. I need to talk to you. Are you all right? He asked immediately, concern threading every syllable. The simple question broke something open inside me. No one had asked me that, not really, in years. I told him everything. The confession in the car, the years of deliberate sabotage, the way my marriage had slowly strangled every part of me that once dreamed. I didn't edit, didn't soften. When I finished, silence stretched between us, long, heavy, but not empty. Then Lucas spoke, voice steady but thick with emotion. I'm so sorry, and I'm not letting this happen to you again. We met that afternoon at a small cafe on the edge of the city, far from the circles Thomas moved in. Lucas arrived alone, no entourage, no display of power. Just a man in a simple sweater, eyes searching my face the moment I walked in. He stood when I approached, waited until I sat before sitting himself. No touch, no rush, only quiet presence. He didn't speak of reclaiming the past. Instead, he spoke of the future. I can offer you a position, he said. Real work, real salary, independence. You wouldn't owe me anything except your honesty about what you need. Independence. The word lodged in my chest like a key turning in a long, rusted lock. Thomas will fight, I warned. He'll threaten. He'll try to make me feel small again. Lucas nodded, unsurprised. I know men like him. That's why you won't face this alone. My team will handle the legal side, protection, finances, everything. No strings. For the first time in decades, support didn't come wrapped in control. It came freely, without expectation. When I returned home, Thomas was waiting in the foyer, arms crossed. Where were you? I met his eyes and felt no tremor of fear. I'm leaving, I said. The words came out calm, certain. Not for someone else, for myself. His face darkened. You'll regret this. Maybe, I replied, but I'll regret staying more. He threatened ruin, finances, reputation, everything. I listened without flinching. Then I walked past him, went upstairs, and began to pack. One suitcase. That was all I took. As I closed the front door behind me, I didn't look back. Fear had ruled me long enough. The door clicked shut behind me with a sound softer than I expected, almost gentle, like the end of a long, exhausting conversation. Outside, The late afternoon sun slanted across the manicured lawn, warming the air in a way the house never had. I stood on the front step for a moment, suitcase in hand, breathing in the scent of cut grass and distant traffic. No dramatic music swelled. No one chased after me with pleas or apologies. Thomas didn't even open the door to watch me go. That silence said everything. I walked to the curb where a rideshare waited, arranged quietly from the cafe earlier. As the car pulled away, I glanced back once. The house looked smaller somehow, its perfect white columns and symmetrical windows suddenly ordinary, almost fragile. I turned forward and let the city swallow me. The first night in the small furnished apartment Lucas had helped secure felt surreal. One bedroom, sunlit kitchen, windows overlooking a quiet street lined with maple trees. No marble floors echoing my footsteps. No heavy silence waiting for approval. I unpacked the single suitcase slowly, hanging the navy dress from the gala on a hanger in the closet like a relic from another life. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and cried. Not from sadness, but from the sheer shock of space. Space to think. Space to breathe. Space that belonged to me. Thomas's retaliation began within 48 hours, precise and vicious as I'd known it would be. My debit card declined at a grocery store. The screen flashed insufficient funds in mocking red. Emails from his attorney arrived like clockwork. Formal letters thick with legalese, accusing me of abandonment, emotional manipulation, breach of marital duties. He threatened to freeze every joint asset, to contest the divorce on grounds of desertion, to drag my name through whatever mud he could find in Indiana's tight-knit circles. One message ended with a single line that chilled me. You walk away with nothing. That's how this ends. I read them all without shaking. The fear that once would have sent me scurrying back to apologize now felt like an old coat, familiar, but no longer fitting. His threats no longer carried the weight of inevitability. They sounded desperate. Lucas kept his word. His legal team moved with quiet efficiency, no theatrics, no press leaks. They didn't just prepare my defense. They started digging. What began as routine financial disclosure requests quickly uncovered inconsistencies. Shell companies with no clear purpose. Transfers routed through offshore accounts that appeared and vanished like smoke. Properties bought under nominee names, investments that defied basic accounting logic. Patterns of fraud emerged where Thomas had always presented perfect order. 2 weeks after I left, federal investigators arrived at his downtown office. Not with sirens or cameras, just 3 men in plain suits, calm voices, folders under their arms. They asked questions Thomas couldn't answer without contradicting records he'd signed himself. By evening, whispers in boardrooms turned to distance. By the next morning, his name was no longer spoken with deference. It was spoken carefully, as one speaks of something fragile and potentially explosive. The news coverage was restrained but damning. Financial fraud, wire fraud, misrepresentation of assets. Charges filed quietly, decisively. I watched the footage alone in my apartment, curled on the couch with a cup of tea that had gone cold. Thomas being escorted out, head down, cuffs glinting under fluorescent lights, brought no rush of vengeance, only a deep, weary relief. Like waking from a fever dream and realizing the nightmare had limits after all. He tried to call once, 3 days after the arrest. The number flashed on my new phone, blocked, but still recognizable. I let it ring until voicemail picked up, then deleted the message without listening. I owed him nothing. Not an explanation, not forgiveness, not even the courtesy of anger. The divorce finalized faster than anyone expected. With his leverage crumbling and evidence mounting, his attorneys lost their appetite for a prolonged fight. The house, the accounts, the investments he'd guarded so fiercely became bargaining chips he could no longer wield. I walked away with enough to start over. Not luxury, but freedom. Real freedom. I began working again within weeks, not as a decorative title or a favor, a genuine position at a nonprofit focused on educational equity, lesson planning, teacher training, the kind of work I'd once dreamed of before fear rewrote my path. My first paycheck felt like a small miracle, money earned, deposited, mine to decide how to spend. No permission required, no silent judgment waiting at home. Lucas remained careful, respectful. He never presumed romance would follow gratitude. We met for coffee sometimes, or walked trails on weekends when the weather turned crisp. He listened when I spoke of the years I'd lost, never interrupting to fix or absolve. He shared his own regrets. The nights he'd searched databases, hired investigators, chased dead-end leads, without demanding absolution in return. Love didn't rush back like a tidal wave. It arrived slowly, steadily, built on honesty instead of desperation. Months later, on a golden evening in early fall, we walked a wooded path outside the city. Leaves crunched underfoot. The air smelled of pine and earth. Lucas stopped beside a wooden bench overlooking a small pond, sunlight dappling the water. He turned to me, expression open, unguarded. "Whatever you choose," he said quietly, "I want it to be because you want it, not because you're afraid of being alone, not because of what came before. Just you." I looked at him, at the man who'd waited decades without bitterness, who'd offered help without ownership, and felt something settle inside me. Not fireworks, not drama, just clarity. "I choose this," I told him. "I choose us. But mostly, I choose me first." When we married a year later, the ceremony was small. A handful of friends in a sunlit garden, no grand venue, no performance. Just vows spoken in daylight with eyes wide open. When Lucas took my hands, there was no fear of disappearing. I'd already found myself again. I wasn't the woman hidden behind pillars anymore, not the wife positioned in shadows, not the girl who'd believed love required erasure. I was someone who'd lived, lost, survived, and chosen again. And if there's one truth I've carried out of the darkness, it's this. It is never too late to step into the light. It is never too late to choose freedom. It is never too late to begin. This story isn't about leaving one man for another. It's about leaving fear behind. For too long, I believed silence was safety, shrinking was survival, disappearing was the price of love. But real love never asks you to vanish. Real security never demands your silence. A life built on fear isn't a life, it's a waiting room. Sometimes the most dangerous prison has no bars, no locks. It's built brick by brick with comfort, routine, and the lie that it's too late to start over. It never is. 1. Silence can wear the mask of peace, but it erases you slowly. Staying quiet to keep harmony doesn't protect your life. It only postpones the day you realize you've been living someone else's script. 2. Control disguised as care is still control. Anyone who limits your voice, your money, your choices isn't protecting you. They're keeping you small. 3. Fear decides in seconds. Freedom requires courage. The courage to choose discomfort over familiarity, truth over illusion. 4. Buried truth has weight. It may stay hidden for decades, but it never disappears. Eventually, it rises and demands to be seen. 5. It is never too late to choose yourself. Not at 40, not at 50, not at 60. The moment you do, your life doesn't just continue, it truly begins. If this story touched something in you, tell me, what lesson stayed with you? Where are you watching from today? If you believe it's never too late to rewrite your story, like this, share it with someone who might need the reminder, and drop a comment below. Your story matters too.